Hello, I'm your cult boyfriend. I'm here with my own personal brand of heroin, right? Is that what he says? I'm here with Jacob.
Yeah,
Um, is that what he said?
it's one of my favorite lines in the movie. Edward has all my favorite lines in the movie. I'll talk about it
Yeah.
later, but my other favorite one is when he says, she's like, "Did your eyes change color?" And he's like, "It's these fluorescents."
I just saw because I had it on like to refresh my memory, and I had to get on this video right at the part where he's like, it's harder for some people to taste human blood. I mean, your blood would taste amazing. Oh my god, but still, Robert Pattinson, holy shit.
He goes
Um,
off in this movie. He really sells it.
I think he's terrible in this movie. I think Kristen Stewart's amazing in this movie, though.
Oh,
I
she's my
really,
favorite part.
I think everyone else is really good, actually. Um, Robert Pattinson, though, maybe he has the hardest thing to sell, but
He did
maybe I'm a
almost get
harder sell
fired. He almost got fired, I think.
from the Twilight movie.
Yeah, from the first one on set, I think he did. I forget the exact circumstances. I think it was because yeah, it was because he was too serious and they were like, "We want you to smile more and make jokes." And he's like, "That's not how I read the character." I think that's why I
Sex, money, cat. Like I can't do that. All right, Twilight. Jacob and I go back and forth on these. We each pick movies. This was a pick by Jacob. Jacob, what do you think of Twilight? Why did you pick it?
I love Twilight. I also just wanted to see how you'd react to it. What is it? Okay, so my relationship to it is originally I read it as a teenager. I think I read it in high school or middle school. The book, only the first book. I didn't read the sequels because I felt embarrassed to read them. And so I just read about the plots online, I think. I figured out what happened. I never saw the movies and I regret it. I watched all five in a week last year with my girlfriend. We watched all five over 5 days, and it was one of the most religious experiences of my life. It's weird. They get weirder as they go on, and I don't know. I find them like endlessly fascinating to think about and watch. I think the first one's probably the one that's easiest to sell people on, and the sequels are more like if you're sold on the first one, if you take the leap, you might enter this weird zone
So
where
let's. I'm gonna take the leap.
yeah,
Um,
yeah, because when you go into the sequels, it's this mix of stuff where you're like, I have so many bad things I want to say about this, but I love this. I'm
right.
so conflicted about things. It's so
Like every
interesting.
complaint I would have is a normie complaint, and I'm not. I'm not normally too normie. Like, but it's so fucking difficult sometimes. Uh,
It's
I
gonna
want to frame
break.
this different angle for a second.
Sure.
Because even if you don't like a movie, you can obviously there's a lot of fascinating things here to discuss. Let's
And
take a trip down like memory lane.
for the record, I picked this because I thought you might like it, not
Um,
to fuck with you, because I thought it might because it fits our interests. I think of
oh
like
no, I think so. I
teen
think so.
movies, melodrama, that kind of thing.
Well, it's worth it. I mean, there are definitely like some of my Criterion subscribers who are looking at like our Buffy the Vampire Slayer videos and going like, might as well just do Twilight. I mean, and then we do. But okay, maybe that was self defeating. But still,
But
um,
continue. Where were you?
I want to take a trip down memory lane because like a really interesting place to go with vampires are always so interesting to me, symbolically, metaphorically, in horror movies. And go back to like back in the 20s and 30s. Typically, the vampire metaphor was for a foreigner who was coming over here to
Hmm.
take your women, and it was basically like a xenophobic thing, either through Bela Lugosi being vaguely Eastern European or like Nosferatu being like very anti-Semitic. Uh,
Yes.
we, we go from there to the next time the vampire metaphor got really cool for me. Outside of like Stephen King and Salem's Lot is like the middle point between where I'm going. Like he did something kind of cool too. But I like when the vampires got really gay. in the 80s and 90s. I like
Yeah.
the AIDS epidemic ones, where these vampires are like androgynous and they live a dangerous lifestyle. There's something wrong with our blood and it's easily transferable through like this really impassioned thing, which is like I think best summed up by Anne Rice and like films like Interview with the Vampire, or like
Yeah.
queer filmmakers like Joel Schumacher with The Lost Boys, or like a Fright Night, all with like heavy queer overtones.
Yeah, I
Um,
watched the first of those recently.
Interview with the
Interview.
Vampire, I think, is
It's
phenomenal.
but
Um,
Tom Cruise kills it. But
oh,
yeah.
absolutely. But so does Antonio. No, Kirsten Dunst does the best performance of that movie. I'm so impressed. But I, the vampire metaphor is so interesting and cool because it's flexible and it means different things to different people, but mostly means like this underlying passion thing, like even with a queer vampire movie, like with the subtext being gay, like it's more so for like like a heteronormative person watching it who like there's a secret part of them that is interested or at least deathly curious about that lifestyle. Or if you go back to the 30s of Bela Lugosi, like Bela's still hot. Like there's a part of the normie waspy audience who's like, yeah, but maybe I would. Maybe I totally would do that. So then we get to something like Twilight in 2008, and Twilight wasn't alone in this. The vampire metaphor is shifted once again to like show a deeper part of our desires, and things like Twilight and the Vampire Diaries definitely we're more interested in the idea of weaponizing sexuality to the point of like a BDSM relationship, and that's like really mirrored because I was like 18 in 2008, and I know this is like bubble theory stuff, subjective stuff, but like a lot of the people my age like are really fucking into like subdom relationships, and I think it's not just a coincidence that shows like the Vampire Diaries or films like Twilight, which kind of have this controlling atmosphere to them and kind of a kinky atmosphere to them, uh, were so popular at the time. I think that the vampire is um the Vampire Diaries does this a lot more intensely. It was created. The show was developed by Kevin Williamson. I'm not sure if you've heard of him, but like he did a really good job with the Vampire Diaries. But it plays on the same ideas. Do you think I'm like? Do you think I'm just running into a wall, or like what do you think
No,
of
no,
what I present
that's
here?
I think that's pretty accurate. It's pretty accurate. It is pretty fluid. I did, at least on the first viewing, I would say like that reading of Twilight was kind of what I carried with me for a long time. But watching it, I guess, with fresh eyes, like a, a decade odd later after I read the book, now kind of divorced from the cult surrounding it because it's not really a thing like it used to be, at least in pop culture. It feels like it's more just about puberty to me than anything else.
Yeah,
And I do think this is a distinction from the book, though. I think the book leans more into that, but the movie, at least this one, kind of
even just
cherry
watching
picks.
Twilight, like I can see where erotic fanfic like 50 Shades came from. Like I can see that.
Yes, yes.
I can see
It sows
shades
the
of 50
seeds for
Shades
it.
here. Yes, I can see that here. I did expect it to be a bit more aggressive. Like if you watch the Vampire Diaries, like Ian Somerhalder is basically raping women, and he's still like the coolest guy in the fucking world.
It's weird
Um,
how innocent it is at times. I don't think that's necessarily true of the sequels, but at least the first one, I think
yeah,
it's like
this one was so innocent to me. Like Kristen Stewart's performance is really interesting because it's like
she's
through
so
that I'm
wonderful.
it's through that I'm getting most of this subtext is like, and also Hardwick is so fucking weird. I dare to call it experimental. I want to just call it like the wrong decision after wrong decision that somehow makes this interesting rhythm throughout the movie of like,
It's like a music
the,
video.
yeah, the weirdest thing you could possibly do to communicate like a character is thirsty. It's like, okay, Kristen, I'm gonna zoom in on you really, and you're gonna bite your lip and like look as vacant as possible. And I mean, Kristen does it so it's through her performance that I'm getting most of these like sub dom thoughts and like the way that she seems so helplessly drawn towards like a monster, like a person, like her own doom almost. Like it's kind of fucking crazy. Like um uh and what does she do? I mean, she weaponizes these vampires too. I mean, maybe not like deliberately, but I remember like her father gives her a can of pepper spray that she then uses on like the main villain at the end, and it does nothing. What is her best
Yeah,
weapon? Her fucking
it,
psychotic boyfriend is.
it's
Like,
it's the line where he's like, like he basically describes his powers, and he's like, as a vampire, like you would come to me if I asked you to, and you would like offer no resistance. But and he's like, as if I would need to, because he's like, I'm the
okay,
ultimate predator. Yeah,
the power of that line is lost on me because he leaps in the air and lands on
and
a
he
tree
does
branch and
the
goes, "Cause I'm fast" or something. I'm like,
yeah, yeah. No, I love that scene.
that's too much. I thought the
It's
sparkling vampire thing was a meme. I didn't know
no,
it
it's
was like.
real. It's real.
I thought it was a
I don't.
bad meme.
I've kind of like burned out on that, where from being exposed to it in like the early 2010s. So I don't think much of it anymore.
Well, that's a thing that I think. I got to speak of you in the third person. It's a thing I think Jacob would like if you've met Jacob, because I was listening back to like our Halloween discussion and stuff like that, and you're like, I don't give a fuck about the lore. I don't care about like staying true to some sort of like
Yeah,
arbitrary framework. If you want to fuck it up, fuck it up. And that I couldn't help but think that with like I don't know, like Stephanie Meyer or Christina Hardwick are like completely insane. Why would you do that if not to irritate? Like,
it's great. Yeah, it's
right?
this weird like
Like this is a
romantic
confrontational film, but
gesture.
it feels so relaxed. It's confrontational though, in every way of the trope. Like,
It's I noted this when I watched it, but I thought it was really interesting how I think I worded it like there's a lot of like signifiers that Edward is a dangerous person, but then at least Stephanie Meyer in the book, goes out of her way to like give reasons why he's not actually dangerous. So it's like he can fulfill this fantasy of danger while not actually being a threat. Like the fact that
yeah.
his family are quote unquote vegetarians, the fact that he's like, I watch you while you sleep. He's like, but then I leave. It's like it's really interesting. It's really, really interesting. Because it's supposed to be erotic, the fact that like
Yeah.
he watches her and he follows her, but then he's like it's only as like a protector role. It's like it's this weird like trying to do both, like have the cake and eat it too. And I think that's mostly a Stephanie Meyer thing. What I get most out of the movie is that it really leans into the Edward as a good person angle and tries to like minimize the weirdness as much as possible, mostly by making him like really stupid, but like
Yes.
endearingly so. Like I love how silly Edward is in this movie. He's like really like it's actually interesting because I feel like a lot of vampire movies, and I think Interview with a Vampire does this, like with Kristen Dunst's character, is that she ages. So like she's still a child, but she has the mind of like a 40-year-old woman.
Yeah.
Edward is like perpetually a teenager for the rest of his life. So he's like perpetually trapped in puberty. So like he's over 100 years old and he sees a girl and he almost vomits. And he's like,
Yeah.
it's so great.
Like Whedon did that with Angel to a certain extent, but not to the extent that Angel didn't still go to high school for 100
Yeah.
years. like,
There's a
if
great
you have
part where they
the
yeah,
collage on the
the
wall of all of their graduation caps, I'm
graduation
like, oh
caps.
no, you're in perpetual hell. Like all you do is go to high. Why are you still going to high school?
Yeah, they say it's because it's so that they can stay longer, because like they move to a new town, they introduce them as teenagers, so then they have to go to high school, but it means like they can stay for like an extra 4 years after high school. So they get lasting power there if they go to high school. I'm like, that seems like a lot of effort. That seems horrible for you.
Well, that
But
was an interesting like question I had to myself because there's definite Boreanaz, there's definite like angel influence on
yeah, yeah,
Edward.
it reminds me a lot of him. I imagine he
Where's the
had to be an
difference? Because I
influence.
was watching it and I'm like, like I'm thinking Angel because of the influence, but like what makes Angel different from Edward here?
It's because Angel feels more like an adult, I think. Edward feels like world weary, but like still literally like victim to the like way of teenager things in a way that I don't think Angel does. Like Edward like literally acts like a teenager.
Yeah.
I mentioned it earlier, but like one of my favorite parts is like he doesn't know how to talk to her in like a coherent way, and he
Right.
looks like a child, but it's like Robert Pattinson with his chiseled chin, and he's like blubbering like an idiot, and it's because he's like this kid who is given this like extraordinary power and like ability. It's
That's
wild to watch.
seriously it. It's like Tobey Maguire versus Bruce Wayne or some shit. Like, like
Yeah.
Edward's like pretty naive, whereas the only way Whedon knows how to write Angel is like Batman, kind
Yeah,
of.
like Angel's really tortured. Edward is just like the dude that like sits in his room listening to The Cure for 8 hours, and he's like, or he, I guess he listens to the Boozy, but all the same, like it's
Edward has
really
that
cool.
free will, right? Like Edward's choosing to be vegetarian, whereas in Buffy universe, vampires can't help it. Like Angel's cursed, and the second he sleeps with Buffy, he turns into a psychopath. And Spike started off being nice because there was a chip in his head that like
Yeah,
prevented him from hurting people.
yeah. There's
Uh,
like a demonic thing in Buffy because they're like you become like home to a demon or something, whereas like in Twilight, it's more like Freudian. It's more like you have like
yeah,
these urges that you literally have to fight to control through like
I did
willpower.
find that like family dynamic pretty interesting. The
Yeah, I love
family were
Carlisle.
cool. Like I'd watch to spend more time with them. Like
You do later. You do
I was
later.
shocked to see Peter Facinelli as the patriarch of this family. Like, I think he was like a semi '90s heartthrob too, and like Can't Hardly Wait and shit. He was really good. He was really cool. I would like to spend more time with him. Nikki Reed from 13, almost entirely unrecognizable. Ian Somerhalder's wife, by the way, so
Mm.
that's cool. Um, those two are really cool. What the fuck? Who is the short haired girl? Because she was awesome. Who the fuck was that?
Alice,
Alice.
she's the best
Alice is awesome.
character. She ends up being like the standout of the series.
She
Alice
already
rules.
stood out to me in more than a gross
She's like
man way. Like she was just cool. A terrible
you get
picture though. I wish that you could have seen me put the parts together in my head of like baseball must be a euphemism. They're not gonna go play baseball.
no,
Oh,
they literally play baseball while Muse plays. You
what
do get a
the
lot more of them
fuck?
in the sequels. The sequels spend a lot of time, or at least the third and the fourth one spend a lot of time with the family. You learn more about like their
It was
backstory. You learn one of them was literally a Confederate soldier.
all right, yeah. Well,
Yeah,
Anna
the
Kendrick, I think at the beginning does lay down the Freudian premise pretty heavily of Rosalie and like their cousins or something. Like
they're they're supposed to be like the facade they have is like that they're all adopted kids, but like since they're not related, they all started dating each other because they were all adopted in their teens. And so
right.
it's okay and it's not weird and they just expect people to be okay with that and it's great. And this is actually interesting. One of the things they get into later, this is why I find like Twilight not only innocent but like really utopian, is that what one of the things that comes into play later is that they're like no, like when they pick a partner in this, it's like they stay in love literally forever, and it like never changes. Their feelings for each other never change for like forever. And it's like and that's why I'm like there's something special there. Like it's why I think the take on immortality is really interesting in this, especially compared to like Buffy, because I think stuff like Buffy or most vampire narratives are like caution against immortality, whereas Twilight, the angle is like why would you not be immortal, are you stupid? Like
Right.
that's and it's like it shows it as like a net good on all possible counts, like you get to be with the people you love forever, and it like it lives out that fantasy, and it's really something special. Like I've never seen something like that. It's
That's
really
another
interesting.
thing, yeah.
It
That
doesn't
I was
moralize about it. It doesn't it's like no, like why can't you live out that fantasy? It's great.
yeah, and like Buffy does moralize to an extent, but at the end of the day, it is like Whedon's nihilistic worldview of why would you want
To
a
yeah, why would you want to?
meaningless life that is forever, like
Whereas
rather
Twilight
than
is
one.
like, no, you get meaning by it being forever, and it's
Exactly.
really
I was
special. I
thinking of
love
that
that.
too, because like the return to form that we've covered that happened in the mid to late 2000s for at least for horror movies had to be extended to teen movies as well, just as a whole.
Yeah,
And
they got really pessimistic.
yes, but I was watching like Twilight, and I've been digesting almost nothing but like 90s stuff for a while, and it was weird watching a teen movie without a whole lot of self-awareness, like one that took itself so like deathly like
It,
seriously.
it's
Like it
sincere, yeah. It
like
doesn't feel the
and
need to like make itself a joke. It's really, really sincere.
exactly. Or by the way, I'm criticizing it.
No,
But like
no, no. I
it's
get that. I get that. I
because there are
like that,
certain
but I get
parts where
that.
like you have like
Yeah,
I wasn't, it was kind of like whiplash or shell shocking like for me of seeing these really overwrought melodramatic close-ups or scenes or stilted dialogue, and then like nothing to follow it to like cushion the blow of it, and it's just, oh
yeah,
no, this is, we're playing for keeps. This is
yeah,
this
yeah.
is
And they do. They do to the very end. They do.
and it's
Uh,
hard for me to keep on that rhythm. Like I can do it for an hour and then I'm like, oh, there's another one, there's another hour, there's
I
another
think
hour of just like you have to follow Twilight like blindly. Like you have to be like, okay, okay, I'm gonna do
you have
this.
to be
I'm
willing to
ready.
like accept its wavelength and just write it out because it's like if you can't accept it, it's not going to work. And I think that's why a lot of people don't work like vibe with it. But then it's like no, if you're willing to from the get go, like accept the way it's going to pan out and just like write it out, it's really enjoyable. New
It
Moon
just
gets a
got to
little
a place where
thornier.
like, yeah, it's got to a place where I couldn't follow it anymore. Went to a place I couldn't follow. Uh,
I I do think you'd like New Moon more because it gets a lot thornier with things.
yeah,
It does. It leans more into the source material. Like it leans more into like Stephanie Meyer's allegiances and things like that. Whereas I think this is all R. Pats, Kristen Stewart, and Chris Hardwick. Like I think it's all them. I think they really like pick out what they care about and run wild with it. Whereas I think the sequels become more like constrained by the
yeah.
source material, which in its own way becomes fascinating because I think the source material is like fascinating. Stephanie Meyer is one of the weirdest human beings to have ever written a book. And
Like, why do you think this film hit so heavily?
I couldn't tell you. It's I guess just came at the right time, you
I
know?
was
It was
thinking that.
when the YA novel was big, so, like, Harry Potter was a big thing, and I think this was a good alternative. For one was because it was actually for, like, girls, like, it wasn't, like, male-centric, which I think was, like, a big selling point for it, but it kind of, like, interacted with the same kind of elements, you know? It has, like, a similar lore system to, say, like, Harry Potter, where there's, like, a whole backstory, there's rules, there's systems, there's, like, a culture, and it kind of builds this mythos up in a similar way to Harry Potter, but it's not like male centric. It's not like it's also not as like in a weird way consider knowing Stephanie Meyer. It's not as like Christian as Harry Potter, I guess, but
Yeah,
it's like really yeah. It's just like it's really runs wild with it, and it's also willing to be I think erotic while still being for girls, which is like an anomaly. That's not really a thing outside of like adult content, which I think was a strong selling point was like nothing else like it existed, but it kinda hit all the checked off all the marks of what people were,
mhm.
like, into at that point in time, so it was really opportune.
Oh
Like, it
no, it
wouldn't
was
work
really
today as well.
prescient. Yeah,
It wouldn't work as well today. It might have worked in the '90s, and it worked for sure in the 2000s. I don't think it would, like, hit off as well as it did today, just because it's not the kind of stuff that movies do today, especially considering, like, the way it's directed. It's like a Nine Inch Nails music video, and I love it.
well, the millennial like psychology is really weird because we grew up in a time, we were teenagers at a time where everything was like going through trauma, like trying to reform itself after the postmodern wave. Like we went through like in music too. I mean, we had like, yeah, like
Yeah,
the Strokes and all those like simple like back to the Rolling Stones after Nirvana came and just blew everything apart.
yeah.
Like everything was back to basics. That's why we're such a nostalgic generation, because the media we grew up with was inherently nostalgic for something that existed before, or like an order that existed before.
Yeah.
Twilight is interesting. I do like that at least when the return happened, they didn't return to God. Yeah, it's immortal, and it's like there's a world full of meaning, but once again, they
You
didn't
don't
talk.
really know. It's so
Yeah,
unclear. It's, like, I think they talk about in the first one, like, they talk about, like, if there's a hell, I'm going to
if
it or something
anything,
like
it
that.
lends credence to like Native American myth more than like Judeo-Christian.
Yeah, the the second one's kinda racist, so you kinda have to roll with it.
I
Taylor
liked
Lautner
Jacob.
is
I
not
don't care. Jacob was cool in this movie.
Oh,
showed up.
he's great in the first one. He's just like a normal kid. It's funny because he's like the youngest of the cast, by far. And I remember being a teenager and like looking at this stuff, and like at the time, Taylor Lautner was older than me, and so I was like, oh yeah, that I see why it's like him against Edward Cullen. Like they're two like older dudes. They're both like attractive. Now I watch the movie, I'm like, damn, Jacob is like literally like 14. I'm like, and I
Yeah.
want you. You watch New Moon, and he still looks like a teenager. He's just like a Jack teenager, whereas like like Arpats looks like he's like pushing 25, and Jacob doesn't look like he's old enough to drink. It's really funny.
I mean,
Although to be fair, in its defense, like in universe, he is supposed to be younger than them. He's a little younger than Bella, but even so, it's really funny to me.
yeah.
Um, he's a weird character. I don't really like him in New Moon, but I also like find the way his presence like impacts the plot kind of interesting in New Moon, especially Bella, I think is interesting. He goes off the rails in the last book. I don't even know where to begin to describe that to you. You wouldn't believe me if I told you where that goes. You like I'll tell you later. You won't believe it, but
He's clearly a werewolf, right?
yes,
Like,
he's a werewolf. That's the whole
clearly.
thing. It's this real weird like exotic thing they got
Here's the
going.
thing, I didn't even know that until like
They they
Edward
telegraph
at
it a
the end's
lot.
like, "I'll leave you alone," and all the wolves come out. I'm like, "Oh, he's a werewolf."
Yeah, it's great.
That wasn't even subtle enough for someone who has no idea not
Yeah,
to like.
it's real
My,
fun.
what? Okay, it's hard not to do like formalist arguments sometimes because I don't know if it's terribly written or if it's just the vibe. I
It's
remember when
it's
Jacob's having that conversation and like two of his friends come up and he was like, "The Cullens don't come around here." Very clear, very aggressively. Then it cuts to like Bella and Jacob walking along the shore, and she's like, "What does your friend mean by the Cullens never come here?" And he says, "Oh,
well,
you
you
caught
caught that
that."
right.
How did you not catch? How would someone not? Like he's like said it extremely confrontationally. Like,
It's so they deliver with so much conviction.
everything is delivered with so much conviction.
That's why I love Arpat so much in this, because like Arpat's as an actor, because I love him as an actor. He's like a really devoted actor. He like really just commits, like, and I think he didn't like working on this, but he like really commits to it always, and he really just delivers every Stephanie Meyer line with so much sincerity that I admire it so much. I love it. He's
Yeah, it's not. And when I say he was bad in it, it's definitely most likely not his fault. It's just when you're told to say those fucking lines and make those physical gestures sincerely, I don't know how you're gonna win there for me. Like, I don't know how you're
he's
gonna win
interesting because like Stewart makes it seem more natural, whereas he kind of leans into the uncanniness of it, I guess. Like I really buy her in this movie as Bella. Like
there. He's
she's
great.
exceptional in this as Bella. And then Edward, like Arpats just leans into the stranger. Like he I think reading the script acknowledged how weird it is, and he like leaned into it. He really leaned into it. And it's also worth mentioning, Stewart, like when she picked this role, she was under the impression, or at least the hope, I think I saw her talk about in an interview, that it was gonna be like a cult movie, like a weird cult movie. Like the way I imagine is like that they thought it was gonna be like a they because they didn't know like Twilight wasn't a thing yet, you know. So and they were like, this is gonna be like a Donnie Darko type, like cult weird supernatural cult movie with a romance element. I feel like that's how they entered the movie, like thinking it was going to be like, not realizing it was going to be
Okay.
this thing. And you get that in the sequels a bit, because the sequels have like a shift in style. Hardwick doesn't direct any of the sequels. I think each one has a different director. I've described the style of the sequels as sort of like Euro horror, art horror. Like it feels like a Jean Rollin movie. Like they have
Okay.
like, yeah, that 70s Euro horror aesthetic, like languid long takes, everything's like kind of golden brown, like lots of autumn colors. It's like that vibe, very melancholic, rainy, whereas this one is like very idiosyncratic. So
I
it
think
definitely
Kristen
feels
Stewart
different.
was kind of right. Just she was 20 something, probably 12 years early. I would call Twilight a cult movie now based on how many people I see like reclaiming it. But
Oh
I'm
yeah,
glad you
it's been
said Donnie
reclaimed a lot.
Darko though. That's it. That's it.
Yeah,
That's a good framework. This
Justin
is
likes this movie too, actually. Although Justin's a fan of Hardwick in general. I know Justin likes 13, I think it's called, by Hardwick.
Oh,
But yeah,
right. Yeah, she did it.
yeah,
That
one of
made
the
me
girls
read
from
it. I
that is in
did.
this actually. Yeah.
Yeah, I said that earlier.
Oh yeah,
Jacob
you
has
did, you did,
said
you
it.
did, you did, you
I even
did.
said who she's married to, man. um, she did Lords of Dogtown, I think. That was good. But no, it's in Donnie Darko's footsteps. And by the way, 13 is also like overly sincere to me to the point
I
where
haven't
like it's
seen
hard
it,
for me
but
to like
I
really
trust
grapple
you.
with it. It's hard for me to grapple with something that feels like an after school special, which 13 does. It's still good. It's just like, ugh, ugh. Okay.
I haven't seen it, but I trust you.
Um, Twilight. I think she's a director who takes herself very like Lords of Dogtown. I think is based off like Stacy Peralta's script, and it's just Emile Hirsch like skateboarding and shit, and it's like really serious and not very fun, but it's still good. Uh, Twilight, yeah, no, this isn't Donnie Darko's footsteps. No, it really is. It really is. Just Donnie Darko.
That's what it
Richard
reminds me
Kelly
of
is a lot more
most.
capable and interested in actually making references through the text of pop music and shit that like make it easier for me to engage with of like
Yeah,
um uh,
I do like the soundtrack here quite a lot.
yeah, deliberately playing with established iconographies and like working with like Kelly was cool. Kelly was really cool.
No,
With this
this is
film,
definitely more explicitly like pop media
yeah,
than Donnie Darko is. Donnie Darko is like kind of anti-pop media in its own way, but this is like very much part of pop culture, pop media. So when it plays like a Muse song or like a track from In Rainbows, it's like very very sincere
it fucking
in like
means it.
how the effect it wants that to be cool, and it is cool. And I quite like that the music. I think there's actually y- um near the end they play a song. I think when Bella's like being brought to the hospital, and it's like a lot of like visual effects and whatnot, it plays a like an acoustic song, and it's Arpat singing it.
Oh wow.
It's like the
Oh,
only song he's ever released that he recorded, and he also has a credit as playing guitar on a Death Grip song, and that's like his only claim to music.
hey, it's not a bad claim to it, I guess. Our
Yeah,
Pat,
he's
he's
such a good dude.
I mean, I'll definitely watch New Moon, I guess.
I
At least for
recommend it.
Alice and Jacob. Alice and Jacob got me.
She's great at it. Eclipse is my least favorite. It has some good stuff. I really really like Breaking Dawn Part 1 because it's kind of psychotic. It's one of the most insane things I've ever watched in my life. It's there's like a Cronenberg animatronic K stew drinking blood out of like a Pepsi can at one point to like satiate a baby. It's insane.
You have all this just this jargon I'm learning. Case stew, our pets.
Oh, sorry. It's the time I grew up in, like only like 4 years off of you.
Oh, and it's worlds of difference. Okay, yeah. Case stew. I meant case stew is good.
Yeah.
I don't want to sound like Justin did on Scream 2, where he's like, they all look different and weird. She looks different in this movie than I've ever seen her look before. Like
It
eyes
was an
are
early
different.
role.
It was
Yeah,
just
it was an
early.
early role.
Okay, because I'm also
She was
not
younger
like
in this.
familiar with her. I know her mostly just from uh like pictures on film Twitter. Like I don't actually know her films very well. I think the only other Kristen Stewart film I've seen is probably like Into the Wild. Like I haven't seen
Yeah.
her in much. And like On the Road, like I haven't seen her in much stuff.
Hmm.
Robert Pattinson, I've only seen like Water for Elephants and Cosmopolis, which I mean, I'm still not sold on Robert Pattinson's
Yeah.
abilities, but I'll watch the
He's always
Batman.
interesting. He's always interesting, which is more than I can say for a lot of actors right now.
What the
I
fuck was Taylor Lautner famous for outside of this?
Nothing.
Okay.
Nothing. He's kind of just hanging out right now. He's kind of like he's I think he's like does the occasional action movie, and he's like Insta influencer sort of thing now.
Okay.
Just posts pictures of his family. He
This
does
might
like
have
the
been the first
occasional.
Anna Kendrick movie I've ever seen, is what I
Oh,
know
oh,
she's
you know
got
what?
like a
Taylor
film.
Lautner was in Shark Boy and Lava Girl. That's what he was in.
How could we forget?
I know. I have seen compelling arguments that, like, as the series goes on, because there's different directors and because each one they kind of like pull and interact with the text in different ways, so they're all really distinct from each other. The like common thread across all of them is Kristen Stewart as like it's like a Sigourney Weaver Aliens thing where it's like by the end you kind of think of her as like the artistic voice of all this because she's the dominant character. She really carries the whole thing. She's so good
She,
in it. She
so
only
far
gets
as this
better.
film could be carried, she carried it until it broke her back for me.
She she
It's
gets
so good.
better.
The baseball scene both thrilled me and broke my brain, where I couldn't engage with the rest of it. Like you should
Well,
have seen me watch that scene of like, what? No, why?
that's what I mean when I say
Wow.
like you have to tell someone. I should have told you ahead of time. Like there's a scene with like weird editing, like from like a music video where they play baseball with superpowers while Muse plays, and it's like you have to accept that. You have to just roll with that, like wholeheartedly. You have like
Oh, you
that's
know who
what
else
Twilight.
interested me though? He was one of the villains, but he didn't die. He was like the suave one who was like, "Don't play with your food." Who? That
Uh,
guy. That guy. Is
Laurent,
he in more? He was cool.
the guy with the ponytail, the blonde guy.
No,
Oh,
the guy.
yeah, Laurent
I
with the
guess he was like
dreadlocks.
suave, and he was like not trying to kill them.
Oh yeah, yeah. He goes back later and like warns them.
Yes, exactly. He
Yeah,
seemed
yeah.
cool.
I think he's in the sequel. Is he in the sequels, Laurent? He's in two. He's in the second one. He's in New Moon. He's in New Moon.
It looks like I have to watch New Moon eventually.
Yeah. The other one is like a recurring villain later, I think. I forget her name.
Oh,
Victoria.
yeah.
My
Why did it end on her? Like for me, as someone who knows nothing about Twilight, I'm like, what the fuck? I mean,
this
it
is
was cool. It was actually stylistically cool. It was just, why do she didn't have
no, it's a
much of a
weird
presence?
ending because it's a good segue into the credits, but it's a weird one.
Yeah,
She's
it's
also
good. It's
so
good so far as a segue to the credits. Not good as in like, oh, her? Oh,
it's also important like back to the baseball scene. The baseball scene also becomes like literally the most important event in this entire series
hmm.
because the events of like all the following movies are kind of like a reaction to like that sort of like and the consequences of the end of this movie,
The
and it all kind
baseball
of
scene.
like yeah, the baseball scene.
And my dumbass was like, are they showing are they making like some sort of statement about like the modern American family by playing the American pastime? And I'm like, wait, no,
I mean,
no.
again, like it's a really utopian movie, so I do think it's at least saying like it's like delivering this image of like no, like an ideal family that actually like likes each other and like
Yeah.
stays together forever. It's and it's weird because they all have like like Edward is older than like his mother figure in this movie, by the way.
Yeah, they did say
He's
that.
the second oldest of them, Edward, because Carlisle was the first, then he got Edward, and then they kind of like built the family from there. And Carlisle like picked his partner, who's Esme,
Esma?
and
Yeah.
Esme, yeah, and so she's like younger than Edward, but like technically older because she was like in her 30s or presumably when she got changed, something like that. Older? She was 25, so a little older than Edward.
Okay, wait, what I just remembered. What the fuck was up with like Alice's boy toy, dude? Like that
Oh,
kid.
he's the one that's a Confederate soldier.
He is? Okay. He
And it's really funny.
fucking
So in the first two movies, he just talks with like a normal voice, but then in Eclipse, the third one, that's when they reveal he was a Confederate soldier, and he starts talking with a Southern accent for the rest of the movie. It's so great. He was like, "Yep, I was the youngest general in the cavalry," and like they do these flashbacks to him as like a Confederate soldier, and they try to get around it by saying like, "No, no, he did it for honor. He did it for respect, right?" Yeah, he did it because he wanted to be a man, and so it's like he wasn't racist. Like that's kind of how they play it. It's really great. They go into like in the sequels, like they try to explain like in the third one, like because the family is largely not present in New Moon. So in the third one, when they come back, is when they try to like cycle through and explain their backstories, and like Bella kind of forms actual relationships with them. And they kind of you get more of the backstory there.
okay.
It's
The
kind of
thing
left
with
in the dark here.
the thing with just watching Twilight is that like I miss.
You don't realize so much
I have
happens.
one like fifth or sixth or seventh of a fucking puzzle. I don't even know how many there are. I have like one piece, and it's
It's
very
it
difficult providing coherence to this piece because,
it's reliant.
like, yeah, like well, from what I'm used to, or like what I'm like, what I love most about like movies and things like that, this seems to be a complete rejection of, like, it completely
Because it's a
rejects.
franchise,
All,
yeah.
well, not just the franchise. I don't care. Like, I love
Uh,
Scream.
yeah, oh, yeah,
It
fair
just,
enough.
it does seem to, as a point of being a return to form in a way, I guess, according to me for some reason. Like, it does seem to reject a lot of like the Kevin Williamson style shit. Like, just reject it, just
Mhm,
outright. Like, or Joss Whedon. It seems to reject Joss Whedon too. Like,
mhm.
we're,
Well, kind of building off of, like, the tropes he put in the kind of
yeah.
public consciousness. Because I definitely think
To me,
this is
it's like bastardizing the. I mean, I don't mind that it does it, but it takes like a Joss Whedon trope and uses it in the way that Joss Whedon would like freak
wry
out.
that.
Like, he'd be like, "Why? Why did you take my beautiful trope and do
You
this?"
massacred my boy.
Yes, exactly, exactly. Um, which isn't to say that it's not a fun movie. It was a difficult experience though because it kept it did keep the same rhythm or the same tone, which is really bizarre and like so bizarre I would almost call it experimental. But it doesn't just keep it; it amplifies it. Like it progress, like
Yeah.
it
The
gets
weirdest part
crazier
of
and
it
crazier.
the weirdest part for me is that, like, like, the bulk of its runtime is kinda just hanging out.
Hmm.
Like, the major conflict is introduced in, like, the last act. I mean, it's hinted at throughout that, like, people are dying in the area, but, like, that doesn't become, like, an immediate threat until the final act. So the bulk of the runtime is literally just them hanging out, and,
Yeah.
like, in this town with their friends, going to school, going on dates, like, that's it's this weird New Moon kind of does that, but there's also sort of a sense of urgency in it. It's weird. It kinda does both, but, New Moon, like I said earlier, it's like it has, like, long sequences of Bella just going to the movies. The last 3 are where, like, it becomes, like, a big event and, like, battles and stuff, but, this one is, like, largely just hanging out, and even when it gets to the end, it's kind of, like, mellow, like, kind of still relaxing to watch. It's weird. It's very,
Oh,
like, calming to watch, and I'm like, Bella thinks her mother is kidnapped right now, but it's, like, it's still comfy viewing. It's weird.
yeah. It's just man.
It's
Uh,
very,
it's
light
a
on its
lot.
feet. It's light on its feet.
It's light on his feet. It's a lot, but it would be like if I made up examples of what I would find to be the most obnoxious way to do a scene, like every, like almost every time, like to a point where it has to be deliberate. And I keep saying like almost experimental, but maybe it just is. Like, every decision seems to be the oddest possible one that you could do,
Mhm.
like from the framing to the blocking to like just every single thing that happens. Like, I don't I don't understand.
It's super weird. And again, like, the sequels, like, don't really lean into that except maybe narratively. That's mostly, like, a
Oh yeah,
Hardwick thing here. It's very much a Hardwick thing. She's a weird, very idiosyncratic director. And I
yes.
think it is very much of the time because again, it's like that music video aesthetic,
So
especially
like
in
if
the era when, like, new metal
okay,
was a thing.
you're right. Yeah, I was about to say like, so if I can admit that it's definitely deliberate, then like what's the reasoning behind it?
I
Because
think
like
it's
she
just pop
also,
styling.
I think so too. Because like there's no she's demonstrated in Dogtown and 13, like she definitely knows how to like put together uh a scene in a subdued, muted, or whatever, a different way, and a traditional way. I don't care,
Yeah, yeah.
in a multitude of ways. So she must have known what she was doing here, and it must have been for a purpose. But I think that like you pretty much nailed it. It does have a music video kind of language to it, but there's a reason that music videos are like 3 minutes long.
Tony Scott was doing the same thing at the time. It's that
Mhm.
very like abrasive visual style. Although this is less aggressive than Tony Scott for sure. Um, yeah, I don't know. Like I said, it's like it's such a weird pop culture artifact, especially like considering like my familiarity with it growing up, even not watching it, like just being around it. It
Yeah,
permeated culture around me growing up.
like I was 18 when this movie came out, and it was just way too cool to be into Twilight. I mean, obviously. Uh,
And I wasn't trying to and I was trying to pretend I wasn't.
like my only memory of Twilight was like arguing with my friend over who gets to have the Bella crown at Burger King. Like that's it. We
I
picked Team Jacobs and Team Edwards, as a thing to do.
I do appreciate that it's, like, not really the thing it hasn't been milked in the way like, you don't get, like, new sequel in, like, 2021 Carlisle, and it's like
You might,
it's
you
you might,
might.
but I don't think it's gonna happen. I appreciate
It's
that
been
it's
trending
become
ever since it went to Netflix. I think Netflix is looking into this.
fair enough. I appreciate that until the time of this recording, it's remained like a very standalone entity, and it kind of, like, just like all things kind of calm down. It's not really, like, referenced in things anymore. It's not really in pop culture, but, like, the people that watch it still watch it, and it's, like I think it's easier to engage with now, I guess, than it was then on its own merits. It's easier to, like, engage with Twilight and, like, enjoy it on its own merits. Granted, it did have, like, some supporters. I know, like, I think Roger Ebert liked it.
Well,
I might
I
be
mean,
wrong.
if you and I think that like modern film tube is pretty obnoxious, it was probably at its worst in like a 2008 to 2010
Yeah,
scenario.
and
I think this film was like unfairly maligned. Like I'm coming at it as someone who like didn't particularly like it, but there's a lot to talk about within it,
it was just a
without
meme to
having.
people at the time, yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
For sure,
Um,
for sure, for sure.
which I think is an unfair way of engaging with it because it doesn't
Because of
matter if you
its
don't like the form. Like, why is it formed that way? Like, you have to answer that before you can get anywhere.
No, I agree. Like I said, because I think what appeals to me about it and why I'm so positive about it is just because of its sincerity and, like, the authenticity of it. Like, I would rather have movies like this right now coming out in theaters, and you don't really get that at all. It's very uncommon, to see,
Yeah,
like, that kind of, like, really taking what you're doing, like, and going with it in a very authentic, sincere way. So I get why it doesn't work for everyone, but I'm like, I would say, like, I prefer if movies at least had this attitude about their process. Even, like, YA novel adaptation things, after this, you got, like, all your Maze Runners and your Divergents and all this stuff, and it all looks the same.
yeah.
Meanwhile, you have this movie where it's
This has a
some of the
definite character
craziest
to
shit
it.
you'll ever
Yeah,
again,
this has a
like
personality to it, a very unique personality. It doesn't
yeah.
feel like a studio. It
Oh,
feels like a
not at
studio
all.
project, but it doesn't feel like assembly made. It's like
Yeah.
it has its own fresh character to it that like if I were an exec like watching the dailies, I'd be like, what the fuck is he doing? It's like
Yeah.
we gotta go down there and talk with this chick.
There's a part where Edward's like, "You better hold on tight, Spider Monkey," and he leaps out a window and flies into the sky, and I'm like,
I
"This is
forgot about
inc"
that. Yes,
So,
yes, yes.
I found it out, the story behind that is, like, they gave him a list of possible lines, and most of them were very normal things to say, and then they gave him that one, and he said Robert Pattinson was like, "I want that line. That's the line I wanna say," and they're like, "Are you sure?" And he was like, "Yes." And he does, and he delivers it so straight bait, like, he loves it. It's so great.
That's
They
awesome.
fly through the trees, and then they're, like,
But dude,
lying in a meadow, and his skin is glowing, and he's like, "We're gonna be together forever," and I'm like, "I nothing else is like this. It's amazing."
Jacob, at that point, my brain was about to be broken from like that. Like that happens 1,500 times at that point. Like
I know.
everything was insane.
It's so much just more than you expect it to be, just
Like
more
I never
everything.
felt more older and out of touch than when I watched a movie that was made directly for me at 18. Like I never felt older and more out of touch than when I watched a 2008 fucking teen movie. I'm like, what?
It's
This is
so weird.
wild. Oh my
It's
god.
And I do like it, by the way, as, like, a teen movie, just because it feels, like, very in touch with, like, stupid teen shit. and like
Yeah,
how that pans out and how people act in those scenarios, but also like how deathly serious it can be at the time, like to them and things like that. Like it kind of oscillates between like the dumb stuff and like the stuff
yeah.
like that teenagers take very seriously as teenagers, but then they, hit their 20s and they realize it wasn't that serious. But it has that kind of like aura around it
Dude,
where
I am so brainwashed by 90s shit. I'm like, where's the postmodern diatribe at? Why aren't they saying they're in a
yeah.
vampire
Th-
movie?
this movie missed the 90s. It just missed the 90s. It's still in the 80s and it's great.
It is, it is. Oh my god. Fucking Twilight. It's just so weird. Like I still can't say that it's good because
This was
it
my
just
reaction, by the way, when I first watched it. I was like, just like,
yeah. I already said like when I watched half of it over again, I had a lot more fun with it. I was a lot more forgiving to it. But when you're like, it's like an assault. Like when you're first like watching it for the very first time, it's very confrontational with its behavior and attitude, and like you don't have a choice. Like you're going to play ball.
no,
It's
that's why I said like you have to decide beforehand that you're gonna like go with it all the way because if you don't, it's gonna carry you anyway along with you.
I was like,
You're
okay, so we're doing this for this scene. Oh, we're still doing this? Whoa, we're committed to the bit. Uh,
I
what
can't
else you
wait to
want to talk
see.
about with Twilight?
I don't know. That's most of what I want to say. I without seeing the sequels, I'm very excited to hear what you have to say about New Moon.
I'll definitely check it out. I mean, I know the posters were really famous when I was like 19 of Edward and Jacob scowling at each other.
They
Uh,
don't really meet each other in it either. That's the funny part.
I, I mean, like, it is unfairly maligned. Like, there are things to talk about
Hmm.
within Twilight. It's just like all the qualities like that I touched upon near the beginning of this video, where I was talking about like those kind of like dominant relationships that could be problematic, but like you secretly want that or whatever. Like
It
that
doesn't
stuff
really lean
is
into it.
no. And then that stuff's probably what would interest me the most on like an analytical level, which the
Uh,
Vampire Diaries is obsessed with doing, like
it does
incest.
in the next two. If you want more of that, New Moon and Eclipse definitely lean into that. Because relationship, or I should say relationships, become
Yeah.
more like thorny and complicated, and in some cases weird and uncomfortable. At least as far as Jacob goes, it becomes weird. Again, I think you'd have a field day with the finale, but and that's when I think I'm surprised. Like I expected you to probably like I was gonna say don't really watch the next ones because I feel like you specifically would mostly like the first one. But now that we're talking about, I'm like, no, maybe I was wrong. Maybe it's the sequels that you'll love. It's the because they're just
Probably.
so deranged. It's great.
It's got to have a weird quality to it for me to really vibe. The
Yeah,
Vampire
you might not
Diaries
vibe
leans
completely,
heavily
but
into it immediately. Like when Damon, when the Ian Somerhalder character like shows up and he's just like, I'm a fucking like serial murderer and almost rapist. I'm your daddy Dom. You're like, oh, well, what the fuck? Show playing into weird teenage fantasies. This is really weird. This one, I wish that Edward was just different. I don't know.
well,
Um,
he's not in the second one for most of it. For most of it, he's not.
okay, we get to hang out with my boy Jacob,
The premise
problematic
is that
werewolf.
like from the start he's like he follows through on what he said at the end of the first and he's like I'm not good for you, I'm a bad influence in your life, I'm dangerous for you, so he leaves and then he the whole movie is her wanting him to come back and it's like biting for him with Jacob basically is the
Yeah,
bulk.
I guess I wanted to see him be directly harmful to her, not like indirectly.
Yeah,
Um, like like it's ultimately not his fault that like two rando psychopathic vampires wanted to kill her.
yeah, it was completely
Um,
random.
I we do entertain it a little bit with like him sucking poison out of her and
Yes.
having to stop at a certain point, but it's not like erotic. I don't know why I wanted it to be pervy, but I wanted to be like a little problematic in that sense of like, oh, maybe I want this guy to tear me apart.
I
Like,
mean, that's how she feels. She's
yeah,
like, I
it
want
is,
him
but
to.
I only know that because of her facial expressions, her gestures, which were one of the most made fun of and criticized things about this movie. And I'm like, this is what actually brings the subtext together. Is like is Stewart in the way like she is foaming at the mouth over this guy, or else I wouldn't know.
Yeah,
Okay, or else I'd have no clue, none.
she gets really good in the second one because she has like a death drive fetish, sort of, in the second one.
That's okay. See, that's
She
what I
does. She
want.
starts doing like extreme shit and like dangerous stuff because she
All
wants
right,
him.
yeah. Okay, that's what
It's
this
be
was missing.
specifically it's because he said I'll protect you. If I remember correctly, it's like I'll protect you. So she's like, if I keep doing this, he'll come back to protect me.
Yeah, the death drive fetish. Now that's curious.
There you
That's
go.
good. That's what it needs.
There you go. The movie's
Any
waiting
final?
right there for you on Netflix. It's all you have to do is press play.
I will. I will. Then I'll end up watching all of them. Then your cult boyfriend
Maybe.
will alienate even more people by the
That
day.
was my real plan as I was like, how can I lose now that I have all this influence? How can I dock as many subscribers from Zach as possible? I know. I'll talk about Twilight, this movie I
Oh,
really enjoy.
at this point, like it's just you
We're on
start
the
off
road to
doing Stalker, and you're like, no, let's talk about Dawson's Creek for 5 months.
we're on the road to hell. They're just on the ride with us.
Perfect, perfect. I I I never really thought about my own death, but I think that in the service of another would be good. Why quote it if you can't remember it, Zach? I tried. That was my bit. But
It's all good.
you have any final thoughts on the Twilight 2008?
No, no, I think that's good.
I think it's good too. I want to thank you guys for watching this video. This was incredibly fun to talk about. So thanks.